Hi, and welcome to Anne's Family Recipe. Today I'm making bacon wrapped meatloaf. This recipe is inspired by Nigella Lawson's method for making meatloaf. Once I tried her recipe, I have never looked back. I don't use quite the same ingredients that she uses. For example, her recipe includes duck fat, which I don't typically have on hand. But the best part about this is these caramelized onions. You cook a bunch of diced up onions in butter for like 20 minutes and they cook down, they get nice and soft and sweet and caramelized around the edges. They add the most incredible flavor to the meatloaf. Aside from that, there aren't too many other ingredients in the meat mixture, but one of the other key elements is the bacon, and we're gonna wrap the whole meatloaf in strips of bacon. All the juices from the bacon are gonna infuse and seep down into our meatloaf, and it's gonna be so juicy and flavorful. The first thing I need to work on for my meatloaf is caramelizing the onions. So I have 1.5 white onions here. You really should just use 1 large onion, but mine are kind of small, so that's why I did 1.5. And I'm gonna dice them up pretty finely. And then behind me on the stove, I have a couple of tablespoons of butter melting over about medium heat. And I'm gonna let the onions cook for about 20 minutes, and they're gonna get nice and golden brown and caramelized and get really sweet. And they just add this incredible flavor to the meatloaf. I turn the heat down to about medium-low, and I'm just stirring these periodically, and you can see they're starting to get nice and caramelized around the edges, and they're softening up, and they smell so good. So in here I have about 2.5 pounds of 80-20 ground beef, which means 80% lean, 20% fat. And the reason why I'm doing so much is because of that fat. The meatloaf is gonna cook down a little bit when it bakes. So I have a family of 6. We need a lot of meat in our meatloaf. So to this I'm adding 2 eggs. This just helps bind it together a little bit. And then the additional binder that we add is some breadcrumbs. So I typically have Italian seasoned breadcrumbs on hand. You can use plain breadcrumbs too, but I'm adding about 1 cup. And then I'm also gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper and a dash of Worcestershire sauce. The one tip that I have for you is definitely cook your onions first and allow them to cool a little bit, because we're gonna be mixing our meatloaf together by hand. So my onions have cooked and cooled, and I'm gonna add them in and then mix everything together. I have a baking tray here that I lined with foil and then sprayed with baking spray so that the meatloaf doesn't stick. And now, the nice thing is I'm not making meatballs today, I'm just making a meatloaf. So I can just plop this mixture onto the pan, and then I'm just making a free-form loaf today. Of course, you could bake this in an actual 9x5 loaf pan if you like, but I'm just gonna free-form it and make my own meatloaf right here on this baking tray. The last step is to add the bacon. So I'm just gonna wrap these full-length strips around, starting at one end, and I don't even cut it. I just sort of tuck it underneath, because, I mean, the more bacon, the better, right? And then we'll do this all the way down our meatloaf. So this meatloaf is gonna bake at 400 degrees for about an hour, or until it's cooked through. My meatloaf ended up taking a little over an hour to cook. It was a lot of meat. I told you it was almost 3 pounds, but look at how fabulous this was. I didn't end up getting any footage of me actually sampling it, but I hope you can tell just by this right here that it was phenomenal, filled with flavor, super juicy, and the bacon was nice and crispy on the outside. It gave the most wonderful flavor to the meat on the inside. Plus you have those really buttery, caramelized onions. It was out of this world. Please don't forget that meatloaf makes the best leftovers. My husband and I had meatloaf sandwiches for the next couple of days after this dinner, and they were incredible. I like mine cold, he likes his hot, but either way, it tasted so yummy. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram at Anne's Family Recipe. Thank you so much for joining me today in my kitchen, and I'll see you again soon with another family recipe.